Guys, before you go on to this clip, please don't forget to press the subscribe button for more content like this. We post all our clips on this channel from the podcast. I know you're going to enjoy this quite a lot. And I also understand you write a blog, right? Inverted passion.
Yeah.
Why inverted passion? What does that mean? I'm sure there's something you thought.
Yeah, so the whole idea, I mean, it was sort of like an advice to entrepreneurs where the advice was to become passionate about what other people are passionate about. And that's how great startups happen, wherein when we become passionate about something, I think that's great starting point. But often we get passionate about a lot of things where, we are surrounded by cognitive biases. So you come across, let's say, a widget or a game you get passionate about and you feel I'm going to build it. But what's more important for entrepreneurs, because they are in the service of delivering value to the world, better way is to study what other people are passionate about and try to build that. If other people are passionate about fashion and a certain kind of thing, that's where you'll make money, and not really obsessing about your own passions, which are a great start, but that can't be the whole story.
And so
if that's the whole story, you might be optimizing. And that's why a lot of entrepreneurs end up building products for startups. The whole product hunt is essentially about that, where startups building products for startups because that's what they get passionate about.
They get passionate about startups.
Yeah, they get passionate about their own small little problems that probably are not shared as widely in the real world. But instead, if you have a mental model that let me figure out what the world is passionate about and where I overlap with that, I think that's a much better approach.
This is inverted passion, huh?
Yes.
How would somebody...
the whole tagline is about be passionate about the territory, not the map, which means you calibrate yourself with the truth and not your opinion.
No, you can't pass off these sentences by just a one-line experiment. You have to spend time, because I think, bro, okay, I could be nerdy about it, right? This could be my problem. I know the map and the territory as a mental model, and I could speak 10 minutes about how important that generally is, how it coincides with language, how the language we use for our internal monologue distorts the way reality operates, because the map and the territory is... There's so much to be said about the map and the territory.
Yeah.
And it's not just true for just that one sentence you wrote. I think when you speak, people can go back and listen to it. They'll find there's a lot of things you just pass off because you live on Twitter. Your world is smart people. My world is stupid people, bro. So you have to explain to us.
No,
map
don't
and
say
territory.
that. Everyone is smart in their own way.
No.
It's just a different kind of smartness.
Sure. But explain to me. Be curious about the territory, not the map. What does that mean?
A very simple example is literally the map, the world map that you see.
Sure.
If you see the world map, and maybe you can pull that up somewhere, things which are near the equator, they seem smaller than they are. And things which are more on the pole, South Pole and North Pole, they are much, much bigger. I think it's called Mercator projection or something of this sort. So,
Mercator projection.
Yeah, so if you see, for example, the first one, I think there is, even on my blog, I have an article where...
Go to his blog.
Yeah, the second one, yes. Yep. I think if you go at the bottom and search that map territory or something of this at the very bottom, so you will see that the Greenland as let's say, an island is much smaller than what it appears in most maps. So in that sense, if you go by the map and let's say you're planning a trek, you will be wrong by such a wide margin. But instead, if you really think about that, whatever the idea that you have, so map in that sense is the idea you have of the world. That is always like an imperfect representation of the reality out there.
Sure.
And the unfortunate or fortunate thing is that we only have access to the map. We never have access to the full reality because it's just so much detailed.
There's so many
dimensions.
The
best model of the world is world itself, but we always have access to models and maps. This is just a reminder that you always have to be cautious that whatever model you have of things, of how people behave, how companies operate, where profit comes from, it can be anything, literally what makes a good joke. These are always very imprecise representation of what's out there. And any new data that comes in should enhance your model of the world, essentially, so that you can make better decisions. Ultimately, it's all about how do you make better decisions in life.
Sure.
And if you have better, nuanced models of the world, maps of the world, you will make better decisions.
Yeah.
Because decisions unfold in the real world. They never unfold in your
Right.
ideas, in your head.
Right.
You want to invest in a startup, you always have a model of what the startup does. But the profit and loss happens when the startup actually goes out there. So
Right.
the more nuanced, more detailed the model you have, the better your decisions will end up being.
Right.
Yeah, so for example, this one, right?
Yes.
So how Greenland actually appears in most maps is how it seems, but how actual size is
Wow.
like much, much smaller.
Wow. Fraction.
So there's a big distortion that comes, and that distortion happens in all the ideas that we have in our head. They're always like a little bit weird or differently meaning as they would be in the world.
Yeah, no, in fact, I mean, one of the best ways to look at it is go back to, like, when you're telling the story of a trip you went on, for instance. No matter how many details you add while telling the story, it will never actually represent the actual experience of being there. And so, language or ideas are a compressed version of experience.
Yeah.
And in that way, any storytelling is a compressed version of the actual happenstance. The world is the territory, and your ideas around it and your storytelling around it is the map. And just this concept, if you look at it, the way people deal with interpersonal relationships, the way people deal with decisions they make about their own lives and how they think about themselves, if they understand that very often they're operating from ideas that are imperfect, that ideas cannot actually accommodate that much dimensionality, that much detail, that much, that many bits, then they think about it very, very differently.
Yeah.
And this idea you can apply everywhere. Like, what do you know about your country?
Yeah.
Let me ask you that, right? Like, what do you really know about India?
Yeah.
And you'll realize so much of it is the map and not the actual territory.
Yeah. I think another implication of it is the way I think about it when people take offense when their ideas are proven wrong. They're like a perfect model of, let's say, how their friend should behave, how their spouse should behave, or even things like what you believe as, let's say, your core identity. The way I see it, if a data point comes my way which proves my my model wrong, what I had believed in a little bit wrong, I welcome it because it helps me expand it. And if the data point comes in which I have discarded as something which really doesn't make sense, then I can't take offense. It's just wrong. So either it's a win-win. So in that sense, taking an offense is really wasting an opportunity to either it's completely irrelevant or it's a welcome data point in your world. So
Sure.
in what circumstance would you take an offense?
You're asking a very important question. What is the need to be angry at all?
Yeah, what is the need to be angry at all? I don't see that.
On the internet particularly.
On the internet particularly.
You could just let it go.
Or you say thank you.
Or integrate it.
That this is new data point for me.
Either it's worth it.
Yeah.
In which case, integrate it into your worldview. Or just let it go.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the outrage produces more outrage, and the outrage produces more outrage, and we are outraging on top of the outrage, and it becomes circular. And at this point, bro, it's not even funny, Internet outrage has taken a particular form where everybody also understands कि PR काम हो रहा है यार. Like, there's inorganic material being thrown from here and there. We all know which actor is doing inorganic PR, which cricketer is doing inorganic PR. We know what companies are doing inorganic. फिर भी हम लोग मान
But I think the important bit is what you said. Most ideas cannot accommodate enough detail. But in the real world, things are just details, which is there's no clean cut, good or bad, yes and no. Things live in the gray zone, right? Never in the white and black. Even people themselves are collection of arbitrary patterns of behavior. So one day they are this, one day they are that. Political parties, everything worth its salt except for, let's say, science, quantum physics, and so on. They're just full of detail and nuances that you can't compress into a simple idea. If that's the case, why you should just appreciate that nothing will be as perfect as the idea of that thing in your head.
I found it very interesting. You were writing about how people will always make decisions out of, I think you were reviewing a book, that people make decisions out of instinct, emotionality, whatever that might be, and then use a very interesting language to make sense of it.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, there is this, I think the most profound psychological discovery after 1950s. Is this guy called BEM. BEM self-perception. Look it up. If I remember it correctly. I may, because it's been many years. But this guy basically ran an experiment where what he did is he gave the participant caffeine pills and then asked them to be on a exercise machine, and after which they were feeling arousal because you've been injected with caffeine. They attributed it to a thought.
Yeah.
And what he meant to show was the way ideas happen in our head is there's a physical sensation somewhere that has emotional content attached to it. then you have a floating idea somewhere in your head. Those two things get attached and you say, I'm angry because Paras spoke unevenly to me.
Yeah.
When in fact, I'm just over caffeinated.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of our thoughts seem organic to us, but are completely inorganic.
Yeah.
in
I think
reality.
one thing which I find very interesting is the way brain makes sense of our identity is the very similar way brain makes sense of someone else's identity. So we have this brain and the whole intelligence. Some people say, of course, it's not the entire reason, but one part of the reason why intelligence arose is because we had to really model how other people would behave in different situations.
Right.
And we would attribute them different personalities, that this person is risk taking. So, and the reason we attribute them personalities because it helps us make better predictions about what they would do.
Right.
And the same faculty of trying to analyze what you see in other people and trying to attribute things to them, I think applies to ourselves also, where we find ourselves just like maybe in an aroused state, and the brain say it must be because of like a thought, because of my personality and so on.
Right.
But so many things impact us that we don't even realize it.
Yeah.
But our brain is a sense-making machine. It has to make sense, and it has to make sense about your identity. Maybe your identity was crafted even without you realizing, by the people you hung out with, by the things you were taught, by even your timeline. And over a period of time, because you spent so much time absorbed in the context, your brain started believing this is who you are, because otherwise why would you spend so much time on it? But you must have spent time on completely by accident or because of situations created in different bubbles, different contexts, people you hung out with.
Yeah, right. So basically what you're trying to say is that rationalization is a post-hoc thing. Now, hone ke baad, we string together the events to make sense of it. And if you think
and we hold it so tightly to our chest,
right,
that we feel outrage if someone else says anything about that doesn't fit with that view.
And even saying the fact that your narrative could be complete happenstance and randomly strung together with the vocabulary and experiences you were given.
I don't think I think it's definitely the case. Life is like a random walk in the world where we go from one point to another, half planned, half stumbling. I mean, who you sit with in the first, there was this theory, I think a finding that you are highly likely to be best friends with someone who you sat next to in the first day of your school. That's how random becoming best friends with someone is.
Brother,
and so if best friends are so random, then most of the things in the world is random.
Think about it like this, okay? Bring a very simple, fine concept like true love.
Yeah.
If you take a random sample out of India and ask if you believe in true love, depending on age, I think 60 to 80% of people will say there's a true love. How in the world is it that your true love is mostly in the same city as you? When there's 8 billion people, why is your true love not in Tuktuka, like Uganda? Like why in the world is how did God design it so perfectly such that each atom understands the other atom and each lover understands the other lover? And they ran a study to this effect and they found that the number one predictor of relationship forming between men and women or whatever romantic relationships forming is called functional distance. Which means how often do your paths interact?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, of course.
It's the reverse. You rationalize true love into your head.
Yeah.
That's what you really do.
Bro, अगर ये सुन के आपको मजा आया किसी भी एंड तक, अगर आप यहाँ तक देख रहे हो तो मजा आया ही, ठीक है? अपने आप से बात मत करो फालतू की. एक काम करो, सब्सक्राइब. Trust me.